The emergency room of St. Mercy Hospital was a whirlwind of activity, a symphony of chaos that never seemed to end. The sharp, rhythmic beeping of heart monitors blended with the hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors rushing from one patient to the next. The air was thick with tension, the scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint metallic tang of blood. Voices overlapped, orders being barked, questions being asked, in the occasional cry of pain or fear cutting through the noise. Amidst this controlled pandemonium, a man lay motionless on a gurney, his presence almost ghostly in contrast to the frenetic energy around him. He had been brought in by paramedics just an hour earlier, found unconscious in a dimly lit alleyway downtown. No identification, no wallet, no phone, just a man in his mid-30s, wearing a tattered coat that had once been expensive and scuffed shoes that hinted at better days. To the staff of St. Mercy, he was simply John Doe. Dr. Emily Carter, the attending physician, approached the gurney with the calm precision of someone who had seen it all. In her early 40s, Emily was a force to be reckoned with, sharp, meticulous, and fiercely dedicated to her patients. Her dark hair was pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail, and her white coat bore the faint stains of coffee and long hours. She had dealt with countless cases like this before: homeless men, addicts, or runaways who ended up in the ER with no one to claim them. But something about this man felt different. His clothes, though worn, were of good quality, and his hands, though calloused, were clean. There was an air of mystery about him, a quiet dignity that didn't fit the typical profile of a man found unconscious in an alley. "Let's get him stabilized," Emily ordered, her voice calm but firm. She glanced at the nurse beside her, a young woman named Lisa, who had been working in the ER for just over a year. "Run a full blood panel, toxicology screen, and CT scan. I want to know everything we can about him." The nurses sprang into action, their movements practiced and efficient. They hooked the man up to monitors, the steady beep of his heart rate filling the air. An IV line was inserted, fluids dripping slowly into his veins. Emily watched closely, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors as the numbers flickered across the screens. His blood pressure was low, his heart rate steady but weak. He was breathing on his own, but his breaths were shallow, as if each one required immense effort. As the nurses worked, Emily studied the man's face. He had strong features, a square jaw, high cheekbones, and a faint scar running along his left eyebrow. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights, and his dark hair was matted with sweat and dirt. He looked like someone who had lived a hard life, but there was something about him that didn't fit the mold of a typical homeless man. His hands, though rough, were clean, and his nails were neatly trimmed. There was a quiet strength in his features, even in unconsciousness, that made Emily pause. Hours passed as the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize the unknown patient. The blood test came back clean, no drugs, no alcohol, no signs of infection. The CT scan revealed a minor concussion, likely from a fall, but nothing life-threatening. Yet despite their best efforts, the man remained unconscious, his body stubbornly refusing to wake. As the night wore on, Emily found herself growing more and more intrigued by the mystery of John Doe. Who was he? Where had he come from? And why had he been found alone in an alleyway, with no identification and no one looking for him? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story, something hidden beneath the surface that she couldn't quite see. The next morning, Emily decided to dig deeper. She contacted the hospital's social worker, Sarah Mitchell, to see if they could uncover any clues about the man's identity. Sarah was in her late 30s, with a warm smile and a knack for getting people to open up. She had spent years working with the homeless population and had a network of contacts throughout the city. "I'll see what I can find out," Sarah promised, her eyes narrowing in determination. "But it might take some time. Without a name or any leads, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack." Emily nodded, grateful for Sarah's help. She knew it was a long shot, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man's story than met the eye. Over the next few days, the hospital staff continued to care for John Doe, monitoring his condition and hoping for a breakthrough. Meanwhile, Sarah reached out to shelters, soup kitchens, and community centers, asking if anyone recognized the man's description. She even posted his photo on social media, hoping someone might come forward with information. But as the days turned into a week, there was still no sign of progress. John Doe remained unconscious, his past a blank slate. Emily began to wonder if they would ever uncover the truth about him. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Sarah burst into Emily's office, her face flushed with excitement. "I think I found something," she said, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. One of the volunteers at the downtown shelter recognized him. She said he used to come in occasionally for meals, but he never stayed long. She remembered him because he always seemed different, like he didn't belong there. Emily took the paper from Sarah, her heart racing. It was a name, Daniel Harper. According to the volunteer, that was the name the man had given when he signed in at the shelter. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Daniel Harper, Emily murmured, rolling the name over in her mind. Let's see if we can find anything on him. With Sarah's help, Emily began to piece together the fragments of Daniel Harper's life. They discovered that he had once been a successful architect with a thriving career and a beautiful home in the suburbs. He had been married to a woman named Laura, and by all accounts, they had been deeply in love. But 5 years ago, his life had taken a dramatic turn. Laura had died in a car accident, leaving Daniel devastated. Shortly after, he had lost his job and his home, disappearing into the streets. As they delved deeper, Emily and Sarah uncovered even more shocking details. Daniel had been involved in a high-profile lawsuit against his former employer, accusing them of wrongful termination. The case had dragged on for years, draining his finances and his spirit. In the end, he had lost everything: his career, his home, and his will to live. But there was more. As they dug through old news articles and court records, they found references to a mysterious fire that had destroyed Daniel's home shortly after his wife's death. The fire had been ruled an accident, but there were whispers of foul play. Some speculated that Daniel had set the fire himself, driven by grief and despair. Others believed he had been framed by his former employer, who wanted to silence him once and for all. Emily and Sarah were stunned by what they had uncovered. The man lying in the hospital bed was no ordinary homeless person. He was a man who had once had it all, only to lose everything in a series of tragic events. And now he was fighting for his life, with no one to turn to. Determined to help him, Emily and Sarah continued their investigation, reaching out to anyone who might have known Daniel. They contacted his former colleagues, his neighbors, even his estranged family members. Slowly but surely, they began to piece together the full story of his life. They learned that Daniel had been a kind and generous man, always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. He had been deeply in love with his wife, and her death had shattered him. The lawsuit had been his last attempt to reclaim some semblance of justice, but it had only brought him more pain and suffering. As they uncovered more about Daniel's past, Emily and Sarah grew more determined to help him. They knew that he had been through more than anyone should have to endure, and they wanted to give him a chance to start over. Finally, after weeks of searching, they found someone who could help, a former friend of Daniel's named Michael Reynolds. Michael had been one of Daniel's closest friends before his life had fallen apart, and he had been searching for him for years. When Michael arrived at the hospital, he was visibly shaken. He had never given up hope of finding Daniel, but he had never expected to see him like this, lying in a hospital bed, unconscious and alone. "I can't believe it's really him," Michael said, his voice trembling. "I thought I'd never see him again." Emily and Sarah filled Michael in on everything they had learned about Daniel's past. As they spoke, Michael's eyes filled with tears. He had known about the lawsuit and the fire, but he had never realized how much Daniel had suffered. "I should have been there for him," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have done more." Emily placed a comforting hand on Michael's shoulder. "You're here now," she said gently. "That's what matters." With Michael's help, Emily and Sarah were able to piece together the final chapters of Daniel's story. They learned that after losing everything, Daniel had drifted from place to place, living on the streets and trying to escape the pain of his past. He had cut off all contact with his friends and family, believing that they were better off without him. But now, thanks to the efforts of Emily, Sarah, and Michael, Daniel had a chance to reclaim his life. As he lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by people who cared about him, he began to show signs of improvement. His vitals stabilized, and he started to respond to stimuli. It was a slow process, but there was hope. One day, as Emily was making her rounds, she noticed that Daniel's eyes were fluttering open. She rushed to his side, her heart pounding with excitement. "Daniel?" she said softly, leaning over him. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was no response. Then slowly, Daniel's eyes focused on hers. He looked confused, as if he didn't know where he was or how he had gotten there. "You're in the hospital," Emily explained gently. "You've been unconscious for a while, but you're going to be okay." Daniel blinked, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of her words. Then in a hoarse whisper, he spoke. "Laura," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Where's Laura?" Emily's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She knew that Daniel had been through so much, and the road to recovery would be long and difficult. But she also knew that he wasn't alone anymore. He had people who cared about him, people who were willing to stand by him and help him rebuild his life. As she held his hand, Emily made a silent promise to herself. She would do everything in her power to help Daniel Harper find his way back to the world. No matter how long it took, no matter how hard it was, she would be there for him. And as Daniel drifted back into unconsciousness, a small smile played on his lips. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he wasn't alone anymore, and that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and Daniel's condition continued to improve. With the support of Emily, Sarah, and Michael, he began to regain his strength. He started physical therapy to rebuild his muscles and counseling to address the emotional scars of his past. As he grew stronger, Daniel began to open up about his life. He spoke of his love for Laura, the pain of losing her, and the despair that had driven him to the streets. He talked about the lawsuit, the fire, and the years of loneliness that had followed. It was a painful process, but with each passing day, he felt a little more like himself. Michael was a constant presence by Daniel's side, offering encouragement and support. The two men rekindled their friendship, and Michael vowed to help Daniel get back on his feet. He offered him a place to stay and promised to help him find a job. Emily and Sarah continued to check in on Daniel, providing medical care and emotional support. They were amazed by his resilience and determination. Despite everything he had been through, Daniel never gave up. He fought every day to reclaim his life, and his progress was nothing short of remarkable. One afternoon, as Daniel was sitting in the hospital garden, enjoying the warmth of the sun on his face, Emily joined him. She had just finished her rounds and wanted to see how he was doing. "You look good," she said, smiling as she sat down beside him. "How are you feeling?" Daniel smiled back, his eyes shining with gratitude. "I'm feeling better," he said. "Thanks to you." Emily shook her head. "You did this, Daniel. You're the one who fought to get better. We just helped." Daniel looked out at the garden, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know where I'd be without you," he said quietly. "You saved my life." Emily reached out and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You saved yourself, Daniel. You just needed a little help along the way." As they sat there in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of nature, Daniel felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had friends who cared about him and a future full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Harper felt hopeful. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. No matter what the future held, he knew that he would face it with courage and strength, because he was no longer the unknown patient. He was Daniel Harper, and he was ready to reclaim his life. As the story of Daniel Harper comes to a close, we're reminded of the power of resilience, hope, and the human spirit. Daniel's journey from being an unknown patient to reclaiming his life is a testament to the strength we all carry within us, even in our darkest moments. His story is one of second chances, of finding light in the shadows, and of the incredible impact that compassion and determination can have on someone's life. If you were moved by Daniel's story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping, emotional, and inspiring tales like this one. Every story we share is crafted to touch your heart, spark your curiosity, and remind you of the extraordinary power of human connection. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on our latest uploads, and you'll be the first to join us on these unforgettable journeys. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of our community. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, every story matters. Subscribe now, and let's keep exploring the incredible stories that make us human. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next video.